Welcome to the New Books Network.
Hello, everyone. This is Victoria Lupashko, one of the hosts for the New Books Network. Today, we are here with Dr. Sandro Galea, Dean, and the Robert A. Knox Professor at the Boston University School of Public Health. Hello, Dr. Galea. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome to our channel, and thank you for agreeing to talk to us about your new book, Within Reason, A Liberal Public Health for an Illiberal Time, published by University of Chicago Press in 2023. I know you're familiar with the NBN podcast setting, but I still wanted to invite you to tell us more about how you came to this project and what got your thinking going about liberalism and public health.
Well, in many respects, this project reflects thoughts that I've been having about the field for many decades, but the project really was catalyzed around COVID. So in 2020, when the world was gripped by the COVID pandemic, my initial focus in 2020 was on understanding the causes of the tragedy that was unfolding in the US, which is the country where I live. And that led to my writing of my book, The Contagion Next Time, which came out in 2021. Mm-hmm. But as I was doing that, I began to think more and more about what we were doing, how we were doing what we were doing in public health. And I started looking around and thinking carefully about the measures we were taking, the extent to which we were balancing trade-offs, how we were thinking about valuing health and valuing other important aspects of human life. And I started writing a series of blogs on my Substack, which is called The Healthiest Goldfish. And these blogs really were reflections on the moment. And the more I was writing, the more I realized that what I was really writing about was about the philosophy of health and a philosophical grounding that traces its roots back to Enlightenment values, to liberalism, and that liberalism was a thread that was uniting my writings. And after some thought, I decided, let me see if I can combine these into a book that is united by this concern with liberalism.
Wonderful. And as you say, that is the thread that goes through the book. And, there are three major sections accompanied by the introduction and the conclusions. And the goal is to, and I quote here, help us see where and why we have gone astray and to begin to chart a course back to liberal public health, one that regains the trust of the populations, end of quote. So, I was wondering whether you could say a little bit more about the title itself, because we have the liberal and the illiberal time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit of a tongue twister, I realize. So let me talk a little bit about what I mean by liberalism, because I want to be very careful that this is not misunderstood. I don't mean liberal in a partisan sense. And in the US, liberalism is largely associated with the left, although libertarianism tends to be associated with the right. In Canada, of course, the ruling party is the Liberal Party. But that's not the term in which I'm using liberal. I'm using liberal in the more classic sense of the word, as in reflecting a way of thinking about the world. As I said earlier, that arises from Enlightenment times. And liberalism means centering, above all, autonomy of individuals, thinking about empiricism and data as informing the progress we make as a society, not leaning on ideology and belief, and thinking about reforming the world slowly on a scaffolding of empiricism and in a way that centers and respects the autonomy, which today we tend to call human rights, of individuals. That's what I mean by liberal thought. Now, I called the subtitle of the book Liberal Public Health for an illiberal time because I felt like we are living in an illiberal time. And by that, I mean a time where public discourse is informed not by empiricism, but by ideology. Ideology has really hardened how we have public discussions. You can be ideology on the left, ideology on the right. We have taken to neglecting empiricism and the dispassionate analysis of the options available to us. We have closed off our mind to trade-offs and to thinking about the range of values that we hold dear as a society. We have been willing to sacrifice the autonomy of individuals out of a pursuit of some ideologically defined greater purpose that often does not concord with what individuals want for themselves. And all of those, to my mind, are illiberal. So I am urging that health in particular, and I'm writing from within health for health, that health in particular needs to be cognizant of this and shift back to a liberal way of thinking.
Absolutely, and as you're mentioning these things, I remember right at the offset of the book, you mentioned a few obstacles to achieving this, right? To achieving liberal public health, and the things that we kind of accrued over time, and this engagement sometimes with different thoughts, right? So I was wondering whether you could tell our audience about these key obstacles, and the way you see them.
Well, I think there are a number of these obstacles, but let me try to enumerate them. I think number one is we have been reluctant to accept that health is but one aspect of a set of values that we want to promote as a society, and the COVID gripped us in a moment where we were interested only in health as an outcome, rather than recognizing that health is a means to an end, and that end is living life fully. Number two, we did not seriously and honestly engage with conversations about trade-offs, that to achieve reduced likelihood of COVID transmission, we may have to impose restrictions that result in students learning less in school, the economy doing less well. And these are trade-offs, and we were not honest about the appraisal of trade-offs so that we as a society could make decisions that balance these trade-offs. Number three, we leaned heavily on communication via social media, and which of course was the medium that had dominated public conversation. But through using that medium, we ended up miscommunicating and elevating ideas that were not vetted and that were not that really did not pass the test of rigorous analytic thought. And number four, we allowed the work of health to be aligned very narrowly with particular partisan interests, and that does not serve the purpose of health, which should be serving the health of everybody. So I think these four, among others, were real challenges that colored what happened during COVID and the state of health during COVID. And in part, perhaps in whole, the point of the book is to push back against this.
Right. And, you mentioned, you talk about United States, because that's the country where you live. And, of course, familiarity with context is extremely important. But I think we can, we're safe to extend at least, if not all, of the concepts and the conversation that these concepts bring to other parts of the world as well. And, thinking about health, right, as one of the things that will serve good living, right, and all of this, I think it can open a conversation pertinent to other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wrote from a place, as you correctly pointing out, I wrote from the US because this is the context in which I'm living. But I do think that these lessons are generalizable. I don't think that the US is particularly unique in going through an illiberal moment. And I think the prescriptions of thinking about health within a liberal frame are very much applicable to all sorts of countries.
Right, absolutely. And we as we get into the book, right, the three sections, they comprise, as you said, of essays that you wrote in the newsletter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the first section, called Foundations, features reflections on the structural forces that shape health and on how these forces have at times been shaped by the illiberalism of this moment. And that's a quote from page 7. And, I was wondering whether you could share with us some of these reflections that are, part of Foundations.
Yeah. So, a lot of my writing before COVID has been around the forces that shape health in the world around us. My blog, a Substack blog, is called The Healthiest Goldfish. And the reason it's called that is based on this metaphor around the goldfish. And many people have told the story in different ways. David Foster Wallace did it in a commencement address. And really, the point of it is that what really matters to the goldfish is the water around it, right? And as a goldfish, you often don't realize that. You don't realize because the water is so much around you. You don't think about the fact that you are shaped so much by the water around you. So a lot of my writing, both my academic writing, I'm an epidemiologist, is about context. It's about the forces in the world around us that shape health and how context is often invisible. So that's why The Healthiest Goldfish is the name of the Substack. Now, take that lens, the lens of looking at the world through the ideas of context, through the importance of context in the world around us, and apply that to what happened during COVID, where really it was the ideas of the world around us that shaped the experience that we all had. So, one particular example, for example, would be the decision soon after COVID hit to encourage everyone to work from home, who could work from home, to work from home. Now, at face value, right, that's an easy decision. You say, look, it's an infectious disease, it's spread person-to-person contact, so if you can work from home, right? So at face value, that makes a lot of sense. However, when you stop and think about it for a second, and you look at data, we knew data before COVID amply showed that people who were in the top 25% of income, top quartile of income, where a majority of those, 60-something, 65% of those people could work from home. But people in the lower 75% of income, which is the lower three quartiles, only a minority of those people could actually work from home. So when COVID hits and we say, if you can work from home, you should work from home, what we are effectively doing is we are saying that we are going to create greater protection for those with higher income because they can work from home than for those with lower income, right? So this was an example of where our thinking and our decision making in the context, in the water that we were all living in, time of COVID, acted in ways that I think are counter to the liberal principles that we want to adhere to. And because those principles would say that we should center first and foremost the health of those who are most vulnerable, and people with lower income are those who need protection more than people with higher income. So we acted in a way through illiberal thinking, and by that I mean ideological thinking and not thinking through the trade-offs of what we were incurring, that ultimately harmed us as a society. So that's an example, I think, of a element of context and decisions that were made without thinking carefully through the trade-offs, the implications, who was hurt by these decisions.
Absolutely. And, we've seen in the United States and, North America as well, right? We've seen all the conversations that came out of it, but the decision still continued through the first year of COVID in a way. So, when you're saying that there needs to be a reflection, I think it's both in the moment, but also post factum, right?
That's correct. Yeah, and I'm very careful in the book. The book is not backward looking. There's no finger pointing. I don't really question specific decisions, and I do that intentionally because I realize that many decisions were made during a difficult time, trying to do the best thing possible under really challenging circumstances. So I really try very hard to be upfront about that. But what I'm trying to do in the book, though, is to say COVID was a tragic moment. It was a tragic moment in North America, in the world. And moments like this, we owe a responsibility to future generations that we learn from them. So what I'm trying to do is to learn from this moment, trying to look ahead and learn from this moment.
Right. And, specifically because if we're thinking, about history of pandemics, at this scale, right, I think, and of course, please correct me, I might be wrong here, would be the Spanish flu, right?
That's correct. The largest other exemplar of this was 100 years ago. That's correct.
Right. And, it was a time of war as well, World War. So, the circumstances and the decisions taken then absolutely right. The context, as you say, are completely different. So kind of having these compound lessons, right, and not pointing fingers, but learning, right, for future would be extremely important. Right.
Oh, that's correct. That's correct. And I think, hopefully none of us will have to go through this again in our lifetime. But at the same time, we know there will be other pandemics, whether they're in our lifetime or not. And the book is, it's a really honest effort to try to say, what do we learn about what we did and how we behaved during COVID? How do we structure our thinking so that next time this happens, be it a year from now or 100 years from now, we actually act in a way that preserves individual autonomy, that is based on data, not ideology, and that finds the right space where we can recommend decisions, where society can continue to go on, where people can continue to live their dreams and aspirations, even while combating the virus. I'll use another example that I use in the book, which is, decisions that we made about whether or not people could see their loved ones who were dying, right? And, hospital after hospital, health system after health system in the Americas essentially prohibited people from seeing their loved ones. And, or if you could see your loved ones, they were behind plastic. And, a decision like that is predicated on the assumption that the only thing that matters is transmission of the virus, right? But that assumption is false. It's you are willing to accept the risk of transmission of the virus if that means that you can actually give a hug and a kiss to someone who you love who's dying, And these are very much human. These are the elements of human living and human dignity that we want to preserve. And we did not value those enough, because what we valued was one thing and one thing alone, which is limiting viral transmission. And that forgets that human life is not simply about the absence of disease. Human life is about dignity. It is about sorrow. It is about joy. It is about love. It is about friendship. And we should not be prepared to sacrifice those just to limit transmission of a disease.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, and I think we all have, our own personal stories where we couldn't see a loved one, passing, and I think that probably would be a subject for a different book or a new book.
Yes,
Right?
or a whole book just about that. Yes.
Yeah, right. But to continue on this track, the section 2, heresies, brings to light difficult yet essential, in my opinion, conversations about public health. And some of these topics, of course, connect to the first section, foundations. But I wanted to maybe give one or two examples of what are some of the topics and heresies, and how does engaging with them promote support avenues for a healthier world?
Yeah, I called the section heresies because these are things that are difficult for us to sometimes to talk about. And I'll use one example, which is the challenge of moral grandstanding in public health. The public health faced at the moment. And by moral grandstanding, I mean creating a societal expectation that there was a set of behavior that was acceptable, and that all other behaviors were so unacceptable as to be then worth stigmatizing. And where we all started seeing it, where you started having mask wearing theater, where I can't tell you how many people have told me since this book came out. There was this time where I was running by myself, not another human in sight, and somebody from many tens of feet away yells at me to tell me to put on a mask. And smart enough to realize I was in no risk of getting a virus from anybody or anybody getting it from me. So then why do I need to wear a mask? So that is the kind of moral grandstanding that we allow to happen. And it happened in the name of public health. And that should not be allowed. We should never have let that happen. And, sometimes I get people saying, well, public health never said that. Well, public health had a responsibility to set the context within which the public discussion happened. Another part of the heresies is about power. And I try to make the point that public health acquired enormous power during the pandemic. And with great power comes real responsibility. And as a result, there was a responsibility to wield that power lightly. I've heard, many public health experts saying, well, we were not responsible for shutting down economies, but I think that's disingenuous. I actually think that the world was looking to public health for guidance. And as a result, public health had the responsibility to be the most responsible adult in the room and to say that we value human life, and we also value the other elements that actually make life worth living, as well as, for example, the economy and education. I mean, our best estimates suggest that school kids lost 6 months of social, emotional, and subject matter learning that they're never going to get back. Well, that's something that we should value, and that's something that we should not have been so willing to allow to go away because we were focused on only one outcome, particularly when kids were not very much affected by the virus. We knew this right from the beginning. But now there's a whole generation of kids that have been disadvantaged because we were trying to protect ourselves at their expense. So these are what I mean by heresies. These are difficult topics, difficult conversations. And I would very much like to make sure that these conversations are had, because I think if we have these conversations now, they will inform our calculus when something happens again.
I would hope so. And I think that's also the impetus behind the third section entitled Hope. And I'm quoting again here. The section contains details emerging positive trends that could help us find our way back to a liberal version of public health. So exactly what you just mentioned. So I'm curious about these trends and their positive influence on public health and on the population's perception of public health institutions.
Yeah, I do end on hope because I try to lean into hope, try to lean into the fact that there are many challenges in the world, but the world is getting better, and I have hope that we will get ever better going forward. Since the book's come out, right, we have now had multiple opinion polls that show a historical lack of trust in science and in medicine, like by a 25-point decline from before COVID till after COVID, which is really alarming and paradoxical, right? Because medicine, public health did enormous good work in COVID. I mean, literally millions of lives were saved because of rapid testing and screening and isolation, because of rapid vaccination, right? Literally millions and millions of lives were saved. So you think that this is a moment where trust in science and medicine should be at an all-time high, but no, instead it's the opposite's happening. The trust is lower than it's ever been. So that should make us say, why is that? And my read of why that is because there is a dissatisfaction with the values that guided what we did and with the trade-offs that we made without engaging the public and getting buy-in for these trade-offs. And those are, in many respects, self-inflicted errors.
Yeah. And, it's... there is a road ahead, and you mentioned this in the conclusion part. I just wanted to ask the question for our listeners: what does the road ahead look like, at least from your perspective?
Right. Well, I think the road ahead is this conversation. It is conversations like this that give me hope, Victoria, because what I'm trying to do is to get us to think. I don't have clear answers for much of this. And as I said, anyone who reads the book will find that I try to be very careful not to be so prescriptive. I'm simply trying to change our conceptual frame. And the fact that there has been willingness to engage with conversations to change this conceptual frame since the book has come out has been, I think, gratifying to see. And I think it gives me hope. It gives me hope that we as a species are willing to engage with the ideas that will make sure we do better.
I have hope too. And, I definitely have read conversations about, this sounds a bit trite, but, the value of life. But in the sense of, what does it mean to live, right? With friendship, with connection, with, not just have this constant fear of disease. And I think a lot of the conversation also spills into, right, other, not just contagious diseases, right, but, cancer, for example, or other parts where, we as the populations, different types, we're starting to think more about this type of fear and this type of understanding of life. and of course the environment we're in or go in and out at different stages. But we've taken a lot of your time, so I just wanted to ask one more question about the projects you're working right now on.
Well, I'm working on a number of things actually with a colleague. I have another book that's just coming out called The Turning Point with my colleague Dr. Michael Stein, which is a series of essays, reflections. Those are sort of written in real time during COVID about different aspects of how the pandemic was unfolding and about really trying to give a set of real time reflections, now edited and sort of refracted through the lens, to try to create a bit of what the book tries to do is to create a document of our evolving ideas during the pandemic, again trying to inform doing better in future. So that's a project that is actually just coming to fruition, and I continue to write fairly regularly, about every week or every other week, on my blog, The Healthiest Goldfish. And what I'm trying to do now is to move beyond COVID and really to articulate a practical philosophy of health, to articulate the foundations that should guide our thinking about health, that can serve us in perpetuity, that can serve us well in future years, on which one can then create other thoughts as crises happen. So that's been taking up a lot of my thinking.
Absolutely, and it sounds wonderful. I look forward to reading both the book, and I hope a lot of our listeners will check out the Healthiest Goldfish that you write about, and you have your thoughts there. I'm going to thank you very much for your presence with us and for sharing your thoughts and the book with us. And I really hope to have you here soon.
Thank you for doing this. I really enjoy the work that you're doing. Thank you for featuring new books. I feel like it is the work you do and elevating new books is an important part of shaping the public conversation. So thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.